Now, what would happen if we realized that our government was doing many of the things that they're doing? Now, of course, they don't want us to see that. They want to keep this report, and that's on the Senate committee's desk right now. They want to keep it secret. They want to keep it safe. And so they're pulling out all the stops. We see from Yahoo, from Michael Isikoff today, he's saying that there's a warning that's been issued by the CIA about releasing this torture report. It could get some people very upset, he said. An internal U.S. intelligence memo warns that the release of a Senate report on CIA interrogation techniques could inflame anti-U.S. passions in the Middle East. Well, actually, just like we were told about the Ed Snowden tapes, it's not any news to the people in the Middle East as to what Americans are doing. It's called blowback. They already know. The people who don't know are the American public. It's the American public that needs to understand what's really being done in their name. He had this to say. He said, "You're handing the other side a recruitment tool." This is a former CIA deputy, John McLaughlin. He said, "It's blindingly obvious." Well, it's blindingly obvious that the government is hiding things, and it's blindingly obvious to everybody except the American people. Take a look at the kind of propaganda and mind games that were being fed, for example, on social media. We know that it's had a tremendous sea change effect in the situation in Gaza. All the publications of all the children that have been killed there, many times a picture of a beautiful child in a play, then with a caption that she was killed the next day. We don't have any way to verify that type of thing, but it's had a major effect on public opinion. Take a look at this article from Global Research. Kiev's fake picture scam. Now, look at some of the pictures. The first one he talks about is the notorious Russian soldier image, which the Kiev government proudly presented to John Kerry as the long-sought evidence of Russian military involvement in the Ukraine. But then they realized that it was actually a picture stolen from an Instagram account of a photographer where it had clearly in the past been labeled as coming from a completely different area. Then take a look at this next picture of this lady with a bloody hand extended, and they say that this is a woman who was killed fighting with the fighting in Ukraine, and yet this was someone who was protesting bullfighting. I don't know that she was even dead. This was a protest of bullfights. Then look at the next one. You've got a guy down on the ground, and that's purportedly in Ukraine, and yet that was something that happened in Bosnia. But then he really gets to the key point here. Take a look at this little picture of this boy. He says, why would anyone bother to fake this picture? Of course, this is just a child that was playing in Russia, but they make him look like he's a victim of war. They say, why would they fake that when they could share the story of a 5-year-old who died with more than 309 shrapnel wounds in his head? Or show the funeral of a 10-month-old who actually died. His point is that the public is now becoming so cynical that they won't accept the real pictures. Further down in the article, let's go to this next picture here where you see this man holding a young child. He said, the public is now so used to fake pictures that they ignore the real ones, except to question their authenticity. So he said he recently posted this picture, which was real, and immediately got back the cynical response, this picture is not in Ukraine, and yet it was. It was a 6-year-old child dying in her father's arms. They want you to disengage. They want you to shut down from cynicism and from overload. That's the technique. But there's a lot of different ways that they can fight this mind war, this propaganda game. Take a look at Lindsey Graham. This is another face of the propaganda war. This is a guy who on the surface is kind of Gomer Pyle and Goober, but underneath he's pure Machiavelli. He says he's predicting an American city in flames if Obama doesn't go to war in Iraq. This is from rawstory.com. This is what he said. He said, I think of an American city in flames because of terrorist ability to operate in Syria and Iraq. And he says, Mr. President, you've never once spoken directly to the American people about the threat we face from being attacked from Syria and now from Iraq. What is your strategy to stop these people from attacking the homeland? It's all about the homeland, isn't it? I'm saying that Iraq and Syria combined represented a direct threat to our homeland. His responsibility as president is to defend this nation. If he doesn't go on the offensive against ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call these guys, they're coming here. It's about our homeland. See, he keeps repeating that propaganda, our homeland, to try to build this up for Department of Homeland Security. This is the same Lindsey Graham who, as we reported, when there were nuclear missiles that were coming out of Dyess Air Force Base that were not even supposed to be in that Air Force Base, and we were told that they were going to South Carolina, that same day, he was warning people that there might be a nuclear attack in South Carolina. If there is, ask where Lindsey Graham was on that day. Another way to put this out, of course, is to play to people's sympathies about being humanitarian as a variation of protecting the children. This article from the Ron Paul Institute points out the irony. It says, U.S. sends humanitarian bombs to Iraq as it warns Russia against humanitarian aid to Ukraine. He says, and this is Daniel McAdams, the U.S. administration began bombing Iraq today with hopes that the disaster created by the 2003 Iraq War II could be rectified by starting Iraq War III. The pretext was to rescue a religious minority trapped by the Islamic State of Iraq and Syrian ISIS fighters, and it was called humanitarian intervention. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Powers, warned Russia as U.S. humanitarian bombs were falling on Iraq that any further intervention in Ukraine, including under the pretense of delivering humanitarian aid, would be viewed as an invasion of Ukraine. She said with a straight face, he says, the humanitarian situation needs addressing, but not by those who have caused it. Of course, it's called an invasion if Russia arms a faction, but if we arm people, it's always humanitarian. It's always on the side of good. Joe Biggs is going to take a look now at what might be behind the arming of the Kurdish people.
Thank you, David. And as we all know, the U.S. has been backing ISIS. We trained them, and now they're on their journey to take over Iraq. They've been slaughtering thousands and thousands of people. But now the U.S. government is going to back the Kurds, the only people in northern Iraq who actually have a chance at fighting ISIS. But the ISIS fighters have been beheading and cutting people, and now the Kurdish military is a bit fickle. They're starting to run. But we're going to give the Kurds weapons, and I think it's for a reason. I don't think it's to help the Kurds fight ISIS. I believe it's a strategic idea, a strategic way to complete a cycle, so to say. We give the weapons to the Kurds, the ISIS fighters stay in northern Iraq, defeat the Kurds, take the weapons, and now they have re-upped their supply of ammunition and weapons, and they're ready to move south to take on Baghdad, their main objective throughout this entire mission. And many more people will die from this. As you can see over the past few days, the U.S. has been bombing ISIS so far with different campaigns, 3 now, and the videos have been pretty shady, a bit fuzzy. It's almost like we're looking for Sasquatch in the middle of the night. It's just another facade. It's another beard to seem like we're helping defeat the monster we've created. Back to you, David.
We need to always question what we're being told, question that narrative. Now, Alex Jones is going to have a special report at the end of the news as school starts again. What kind of brainwashing are we going to see from the mainstream media? We know what we're seeing from the mainstream media towards Christians. Can Christians have the discernment to understand what's behind the tragedies that we're seeing unfolding in Syria and in Iraq? The article up on Infowars.com today, Christian brothers and sisters, did you know our government is supporting Islamic terrorists? And of course, there's real terrorism going on. As Washington's blog points out, people are literally being crucified for being Christians in Iraq as well as in Syria. He said they're not only beheading Christians, they're systematically beheading Christian children. In Syria, rebels fighting against the Syrian government told Christians either you convert to Islam or you'll be beheaded. Syrian rebels slit the throat of a Christian man who refused to convert to Islam, taunting his fiancée by yelling, "Jesus didn't come to save him." Yet we don't look at what's behind this. We just are told these stories to have a visceral reaction to strike out against someone. And many Christians don't have the discernment to understand where this is all coming from. This is a very important article that's up on Infowars.com. It's very lengthy. We don't have time to go into even most of the quotes from it. We've told you many of these things over and over again. It's always good to have this back in a compendium. He's got sources from ABC News, from WorldNet Daily, from Der Spiegel, The Guardian, Jerusalem Post, Breitbart, The Independent, on, talking about how our government has created these rebels in Syria, allowing them, equipping them, training them, and then they go in and attack these people in Syria. Now they're going into Iraq doing the same thing. And yet, what do we see from the Obama administration and even from Hillary Clinton? They're pretending that never happened. Even though we've got the pictures of John McCain posing with the terrorists, even though we've got all of these reports that are in this article talking about how we created and funded and trained these groups. Barack Obama is saying that this is a fantasy, that if they armed these people, that it would have stopped what's going on in Iraq. He had an interview this weekend with the New York Times, and he said, in Syria, Obama said the idea that arming rebels would have made a difference has, quote, always been a fantasy. Now, they see this as a rebuke to Hillary Clinton, who had just previously given an interview about her memoir, saying that she thought that our failure to build a strong rebel force against the Assad regime left a big vacuum where the jihadists have now filled. In other words, they're both pretending that this never happened, while she is politically sucking up to the neocons, saying that she likes George Bush, saying that, well, we really should have done something to take down the Syrian regime, when actuality, they really did. Now, stay with us right after the break. We've got some interesting news on the technology front, as well as what's with the Ebola vaccine. This is a case of a genetically modified vaccine coming from DARPA. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen.
For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox Special at InfoWarsLife.com.